Good morning, y'all. Cults have existed here in the United States for decades and decades and decades. A lot of famous cults exist, and some still exist today. One not too long ago got tax exempt status, and I won't mention who they are, but Leah Remini knows who they are. But I don't really want to talk about those cults, perhaps, except to talk about some of the things that compare with the biggest, most dangerous cult here in the United States, perhaps in United States history. And many of you know them, and some of you actually are a member of this cult and may not even realize it. And you kind of know what a cult is like. They grab you in, they try to indoctrinate you, inculcate things. They'll go after the kids and try to program them at an early age to, well, you can go back to places like Jonestown in Guyana. Remember that? It cost the lives of almost 920 people approximately. We have a lot of cults that do that, but the most dangerous one of all is the one that doesn't have the cult label, but they are definitely a cult, and they are known as the Democratic Party. That's right, the Democratic Party is a cult. In fact, DNC should stand for Democrat or Democratic National Cult, because they are. And you look at them and you can see many of the comparisons to some of the cults that we have around the United States today. For example, members express an undue devotion to the party, but not a set of principles that actually can benefit the members. They have blind faith. I mean, you watch in lieu of the Trump verdict here last week, I've watched many people go out on the streets and interview people with their thoughts. They come across a Democrat. I was glad he was found guilty. What was he charged with? I don't know. Well, can you tell me why you're glad he's found guilty? Well, I'm a Democrat. Yeah, okay. No, you're a cult member. Also, in a cult, members have to ascribe to a certain belief or beliefs. And if you don't ascribe to those beliefs, well, you may have to go into auditing. You may have to, and you can figure that one out, you may have to be punished. And members of the Democratic cult, the Democratic Party cult, they must be pro-abortion. They have to be pro-abortion, or they can never contest out loud any type of pro-life stance. You got to be pro-abortion. Because after all, women's rights, women's rights, women's rights, we got to slaughter the children. It's the woman's body. Even though the blood type can be different, that's a different debate. But according to the Democratic Party, if you're going to be a member, you've got to be pro-death, basically. You have to be willing to sacrifice your children. I guess that's almost like a badge of honor they have. Now, if you have or hold any opinions that are contrary to the cult, that really is expressly forbidden. And it's not just abortion, it can be anything. You want lower taxation? Well, that's extremist. You want marriage to be defined as a union between a man and woman? That's extremist. We'll talk about some of the other things, but you're not allowed to have a contrary view when you're in the Democratic Party, or you'll be ousted or face punishment. And the Democratic Party lies to minorities or has abused minorities in the past. And you might remember, like the Mormon Church. Black people couldn't really be saved in the Mormon Church until suddenly their prophet a few years ago, I think due to public pressure, all of a sudden welcomed them into the priesthood. But the Democrats, and this is something a lot of people don't realize, especially Democrats. They either don't realize it or they don't care. The Democratic Party was the original slave owners. Now, I'll ask you a quick question. During the Civil War and prior to the Civil War, how many Republicans owned slaves? And we could do that tick-tock sound, and you could think about it for a moment, but instead of you thinking about it, I'll just give you the answer. The answer is 0. No Republicans owned slaves. It was purely a Democrat phenomenon. Democrats owned slaves, not Republicans. And of course, following the Civil War, remember, Republicans started really by 7 pastors. Republicans fought to free the slaves. People tend to forget that now. Democrats fought to keep the slaves, keep slave ownership. Following the Civil War, they started the Ku Klux Klan. They tried to deny blacks the right, the privilege to vote. And this went on for years and years, decades after the Civil War. Decades after the Civil War. But you ask the average Democrat nowadays and say, Republicans, they're the racists. No, blunk. That is bovine excrement, folks. It's the Democrats that have been anti-black or have used blacks for both slaves and slaves in a different sense over the last century or so, trying to convince them that it is Republicans. So they are past deniers. They deny these types of things. They deny a lot of things. Like many cults also, they sort of force tithing. There's a certain 2 or 3 cults that actually force you join them, and they want you to go all the way back to when you first started working and pay your 10% or whatever it is. And when taxation came into this country under, Woodrow Wilson, it was 1% tax on the top 1%. Now, what is it now? Well, you people in the middle, a lot of you are paying 30 or 40% in taxes too. Not all income taxes, granted, but sales tax, property tax, gasoline tax. And speaking of which, there in California, they're talking about adding another 50 cents a gallon in gas. Oh, thank you, Gavin Newsom. But we see that Democrats figure out all sorts of unique ways to get money out of you. They force tithing. And they're constantly pointing the fingers at those they consider to be outside outside the Democratic Party. They label them as enemies. If you're not a liberal, now progressive Democrat, you are an enemy. If you think that Israel has the right to defend themselves against terrorists, well, you're an enemy. And did you know most of these guys that have been marching on college campuses or camping in saying death to America, death to Israel, death to the Jews, guess what party they belong to? Most of them are Democrats. And of course we see a lot of Democrats in Congress pretty much doing the same thing. That progressive squad, which ought to be called the regressive group of idiots, they're doing the exact same thing, but it's part of the cult thing. So they constantly point the fingers at others and demonize them. That is a big cult practice, by the way. And not only that, I mentioned that they deny a lot of the past, but they're also science deniers. Did you know that? They are science deniers. They don't believe in science. You might recall that the Catholic Church, 408 years ago, came out and basically outlawed Copernicus' theory about us being heliocentric here in this galaxy, meaning he had said that the sun was the center of our galaxy, since been proven. But the Catholic Church at that particular time said, no, can't be. And in fact, we go to, I think it was 1633, they had a heretical or a heretic trial for Galileo, because Galileo supported that. Science deniers. The Catholic Church turned out to be wrong. But we also see that the Democratic Party leadership denies that a fetus is an unborn human. No, it's just a clump of cells. Well, do the science on it, folks. It is a human being. It is a baby, an unborn human. It's not an unborn dog. It's not an unborn jellyfish. Science will tell us what that unborn child actually is. But Democrats, like many cults, are science deniers because science flies in the face of their particular position. But not only are they science deniers on that, they embrace some type of pseudoscience. Well, let's get back to them denying science. They are now denying that basically your sex and gender is defined by science. You have 2 X chromosomes at birth. Guess what? You're a female. They don't know what a woman is, but I'll tell you, a woman is an adult female. 2 X chromosomes. A man has XY chromosomes. Now, we never really know when a man becomes a man because men are basically kids for a big portion of their life. But the Democrats deny that. Why? Because they are trying to create a different portion of society. So we're going to deny the science and say you can be any gender you want. Sometime in the near future, I'll give you the list of the 100 latest pronouns that we are using for genders as opposed to he and him, his, hers, etc. A lot of crazy stuff that happens to be going on out there. But the Democratic Party, like the Catholic Church did many, many years ago, engages in something I think we could call the Inquisition. And it's, again, against fellow Americans that they perceive as enemies of the faith. In this case, the faith, the undying allegiance to the Democratic Party. If you're not into that, boy, they're going to go after you. They're going to have an inquisition. Remember Maxine Waters, where she was telling the Democrats, when it came to Republicans or Trump supporters, get out there and get in their face, which, of course, was sort of a code word for be violent, and they have expressed violence over and over again, which many cults do. But we have seen them target people like you and I. We have been called deplorable, unworthy, worthless, extremists, idiotic, dumb. And instead of the rack and other ancient torture systems used during the time of the Catholic Church history and the Inquisition, things that went on there, they will use the mainstream media to go after you. They will use the courts. They will use lawfare. They will use the Department of Justice to unfairly target people who maybe pray outside of an abortion clinic. Oh my gosh, how dangerous is that? Can't have them doing that. And they'll arrest them. They arrested people who simply walked by the Capitol building on January 6th. Remember that great, horrible insurrection worse than 9/11? But you might recall that only one person was killed during that, and that was a woman, unarmed woman, shot by Capitol Police. Unarmed woman, wasn't doing anything. We won't go into that, but they will use those kind of techniques. They'll use the FBI. They will use Soros-backed DAs. They will use corrupt judges and wacko celebrities like Robert De Niro, who, based on some of the things he said last week, we need to change his name to Robert Deranged-O instead of Robert De Niro. The man's absolutely insane, but they will use this to intimidate, to imprison you in your homes, or sometimes Rikers Island, like the most corrupt judge in America, at least in my view right at the moment, Juan Merchan in New York, could sentence President Trump to over 100 years in prison for a little accounting notation. Something that really isn't a crime, was a misdemeanor at very best, which expired several years ago, but a corrupt DA by the name of Alvin Bragg, as part of that cult, went after Trump and elevated that up to a felony. Now, which is ironic because Alvin Trump, pardon me, forgive me, President Trump, Alvin Bragg has, in most cases, taken felonies and reduced them to misdemeanors or just dismissed them altogether. But because he is being paid by the Democratic Party to go after Trump, just like Robert De Niro, by the way, who was paid by the Biden campaign to go after Trump. Yes, Robert Deranged-O, he went in and he did all of his cultic stuff on Trump being paid by Biden. Now, like many cult leaders, the Democratic Party enriches itself through subterfuge and lies, insider trading, fundraising based on lies. I mean, you tell me how Nancy Pelosi took her annual salary, which isn't too bad, but she turned it into $100 million. And of course, as she is part and parcel of those who pass laws that might benefit certain companies, you pass that info on to the hubby, Nancy, and of course you're buying stock and you're getting wealthy. Oh boy. And did you know that becoming a Democrat is sort of akin to signing a billion-year contract, meaning you've got to be a Democrat the rest of your life, which in my previous video talking about Michelle Wu, that Democrat politician, the mayor of Boston, who's going to do absolutely crazy things. You know, she's going to, target Republicans once again. She's already been targeting white people in her racism, which is another cultic practice. But you got to sign this billion-year contract to be a Democrat forever. Otherwise, you're going to be ostracized. You're going to experience something called disassociation or disaffecting. You're going to be cut off from your relatives. You're going to be cut off from your base. You're going to be cut. If you ever leave the Democratic Party, you know what I mean. A lot of them are so diehard into the cult, they won't have anything to do with you. In fact, many of them won't have anything to do with non-Democrats even today. Not all of them. There's a few honest ones. I don't know too many of them, but they're out there. But anyway, if you deviate from the DNC's cultic type of teaching or their beliefs or policies, you can expect, we'll call them squirrel hunters, and you can look that up and you'll see what I'm talking about. They're going to begin to follow you and antagonize you. They're going to show up at your house. Maybe you're a Supreme Court justice, and all of a sudden these protesters are going to show up at your house and in violation of federal law, trying to unduly influence a federal judge, in this case, the highest judges in the land. And of course, they can do it and not have any problem because, well, the Democratic Party certainly isn't going to go after them. Law enforcement apparently isn't going to go after them and prosecute them. You really have to push to get that done. But they will go after you, and they will intimidate, and they will do everything, even in violation of the law, to get you to do something. They want you to assault somebody or something like that so they can get it on camera, and suddenly that will be the news. Not the things that the Democratic Party has been doing, thanks to the mainstream media, the cultic arm. And, they're also going to, a lot of cults want to destroy the other churches around them. Well, the Democratic Party tried to do the exact same thing. Remember, not too long ago, you might remember a certain thing known as the COVID pandemic, which personally I believe a lot of it was a big farce. Did you know that the Democratic Party primarily closed churches? The governor of California, you might remember him, Governor Newsom, but Newsom sounds better. He closed churches. And we saw pastors arrested. We saw parishioners, congregations maybe being ticketed if they showed up. Well, at the same time, we have millions of illegal immigrants pouring across the border. They were allowed to hang around people. They were allowed to talk. They were allowed to communicate. Certain concerts were allowed to take place, but no, churches. We got to shut down the churches. And that is one of the big things about cults. They want to totally silence all of their defectors and detractors. The Democratic Party is a cult. The Democratic Party is a cult. If you disagree, please leave some comments. Defend the Democratic Party. Perhaps I'm wrong. I'm not, but maybe you can find some reasons to insult Republicans. They weren't the slave owners. They're not the cult. It is the Democratic Party using all of these cultic techniques to destroy this country. So leave some comments, share this video, complain, call me names, whatever you want to do, but the Democratic Party is a cult. The Democratic Party is a cult. DNC now stands for disastrous, narcissistic cult. We'll have more later. See ya.